Started. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation's E3 Power of a Champion series. My name is Stephanie Johnny, and I am the acting director for the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. The Power of the Champion series is part of the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation's E3 Learning Collaborative, launched earlier this year. Each month, we hold a lunch and learn to provide educational resource to help entrepreneurs grow their business, spotlight an entrepreneurial champion and an individual owner or business that they support. We have a few more sessions coming up that are planned for the rest of the year. We do have a session scheduled for November 4th, which will be Understanding Your Customer's Journey featuring Hook PR. On November 17th, we will be doing another Power of Entrepreneurial Champion series featuring Thayer Dupont and Marquivas Gideon. And on December 9th, we will be doing another Power of Entrepreneurial Champion series featuring Chris Buccini and DETV. So I'm very excited to just jump right into it today and announce our speakers for today and introduce you guys to our E3 partner, PMG Consulting, Chrissy Handley and Peggy Geisler. Peggy will be moderating the conversation today. And our featured speakers today are Ben du Pont and Desa Burton. So for those who are unaware, I'm going to give a quick intro on each of our featured speakers so you can get to know them a little bit more, and then we'll just dive right into the conversation. If anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, please use the chat box. We're going to be moderating that as well. And there's also a raise hand feature. Please use that. And also a Q&A box that we'll be monitoring and keeping an eye on all of your questions. Ben du Pont is the co-founder and managing partner at Chartline Capital Partners, a venture capital fund that has 26 portfolio companies and invests in structured stage venture capital. Ben leads the firm's fundraising, origination, and portfolio support by connecting companies to additional strategic partners, customers, and co-investors. Ben is also the co-founder and board president of Zip Code Wilmington and serves as a board director of Urban Bound, Gig Sky, Arico, Vorbeck, Longwood Gardens, the Tower Hill School, and of course, the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation. Ben has a 1986 BSME from Tufts University, and he is a licensed pilot, a ham radio operator, and an avid sailor. Desa Burton is the executive director of the nationally recognized nonprofit coding school, Zip Code Wilmington, established in 2015 to support the economic development of Delaware by providing accessible and affordable software development training to high potential individuals who have the raw talent necessary to become software developers and data engineers. Desa is responsible for executing the organization's strategic and operational plans while carrying out its mission. Desa has a professional background as a former U.S. Navy lieutenant commander and intellectual property attorney. Desa also works as an adjunct law professor and an author/speaker. Thank you, Desa, and thank you, Ben, so much for joining us today. We're really excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Hearing that lineup is just amazing that you have coming up. So I'm very honored to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to toss it over to Peggy Geisler, again, one of our E3 partners, who's going to be moderating conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm honored to be here and help to support and serve. So let's just jump right in. People are really interested. Desa, can you give us sort of a high level overview, a little bit about Zip Code, as an organization and what it does, not just from the, logistics, but what do you think it does for the individual it serves?
Sure. So Zip Code Wilmington was founded to support the economic development of the greater Wilmington region by providing accessible and affordable software programming to high potential individuals who have the raw talent, but maybe not the opportunity to become entry-level software developers and data engineers. So basically, one coder at a time, we're changing the economy of the Wilmington region. What does that mean to these individuals? It means they can go from being a barista to being a software developer, creating sophisticated software programs for the financial institutions that you find in Wilmington. It means that you could be working at Chick-fil-A one day, and in 3 months, 4 months, you could be working at a company doing their high-level data engineering, supporting a data scientist at a company like Comcast or Wilmington University. Wilmington Trust or other companies like that. So it's transformative. It's transformative for those students, and it's transformative for their families. It's transformative for their friends. To go from an average of $25,000 a year to $75,000, $85,000, $100,000 a year is life-changing for your family. It gives you opportunities that you just might not have had before. It takes worry away that you didn't even realize you had. It takes away for having to work 2 to 3 jobs, just having one job that you can focus on and really be happy. That makes a huge difference in the lives of people, and it makes a huge difference in the community overall. So that's what we're doing.
Wow. So, I mean, I'm going to reflect on that before I go to my next question, which is, so what you're telling me is how many weeks is that program, Desa?
It's a 12-week program. We have 2 tracks. One is software developer, and the other is data engineering. You don't have to have any coding experience before you come either. So we teach people everything they need to know, soup to nuts from the beginning. And they also get professional development training. They get a resume, everything you need in order to start a career in technology.
So 12 weeks, you can go from $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 increase in your livelihood.
Yes, that's right.
I would imagine that competition is steep to get in. How many people apply, just out of curiosity?
So we get around 200 applications, anywhere from 200, sometimes more. Pre-COVID, we used to get about 400 applications. We can only take about 25 to 35 folks into a cohort. So competition is steep. It's about a 10% acceptance rate, something that Ben notes every now and then, that it's more challenging to get into zip code than it is to get into Harvard or Dartmouth. But it's because it's such a great opportunity, and because it is so transformative, that a lot of people apply, and there's no cost to apply. So people reapply all the time. There's nothing wrong with not getting in the first time. We tell people that. In fact, if you're applying for the second time, it shows that you're really determined to get in. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So Ben, I'm going to ask you a really quick question. Zip code, it was an idea, right? And it got started somewhere and at some point. Can you talk a little bit about the history? Like, how did it actually evolve? How did it get started? Where did it occur? Where did it?
So Porter Shutt, Jim Stewart, and I, moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats, all got together, and I think the original pain point was it's just very hard to hire software developers in the country, anywhere, it is a fast-moving skill set that needs to adapt quickly. I think all 3 of us, Jim, Porter, and I, with various companies we've been working with, saw the pain. And we sat down with Governor Markell and said, we think Delaware needs to have this. And he then went out and asked a lot of the local banks, how do you recruit? And the answer came back pretty interesting. I think this with Alan Levin, who was Secretary of Economic Development back then. And the answer came back is we hire from each other, which didn't occur to any of us to be a sustainable model. So off we went. We tried to get a Palo Alto based software bootcamp to come to Delaware. And we were unsuccessful at doing that. They just didn't understand why they should be on the East Coast at all. Maybe, I don't know. And we said, the hell with it. We'll just try to do it ourselves. We thought we needed $1 million budget. We raised $1.7 million, and certainly less than 2 months. And the major banks all participated. The major foundations participated. Ironically, the founders didn't need to participate. We would be always here if the school needed capital. But this is what's interesting about the model is it is essentially a profitable nonprofit, and with employers picking up some of the tab and students picking up some of the tab. And I think that's generally a good place to be. So that was the genesis of it. And I think today, Desa, you've graduated about 500 students, something like that. And you estimate, I think, about 80% are still employed in the Delaware area, which probably includes parts of Philadelphia, but in the broader region.
Yes.
And you look at the economic impact of that. Particularly in those earlier cohorts, I know you have some data, some anecdotal data, but we suspect, I think I've heard you tell me, that, there's a lot of people now earning over 100K that came out of those early cohorts. So if you look, and I know there's a series of op-ed page pieces coming out on a pathway to 100K. And I think this is an awesome way to do it. And what gets me are the stories. Line cooks at IHOP. Who was the refugee? Just when you joined, Desa, who was the refugee that came from Africa? Was a waiter in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. Heard one of the patrons mention it. And applied and got in. And I think his opening offer was near 100K, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure which person you're talking
about. There are a lot of those stories.
I think you're mixing those stories together, but yeah, I mean, that opportunity has come for a number of folks that have showed up a zip code without any coding skills at all. And after they get the training, they just get amazing offers from companies. Yep.
So there's this entrepreneurial idea, and it meets the synergy of what does the community need, willing to help, place. The other thing is too, didn't this also get launched through Reinventing Delaware? I mean, this idea was like kind of put out on the floor there, wasn't it? I want to make sure that, these ideas, they kind of start in those kind of places and then they get put out there and then others adopt them and get behind them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a society. We need to do, look, it's easy for somebody like me who's born on second base and maybe working hard to hit a triple, but we need a better process across our society to get people that don't have those advantages to have them. And so one of the things the foundation are trying to do with my brother Thayer and the whole board is to try to create a process where we can take innovative ideas for profit and nonprofit and help get underrepresented owners and managers of business hiring. And I mean, everybody kind of wins when that happens. Absolutely. I was looking at a really interesting study in a book called The Future Worker. But if you look at the relationship between good jobs and families and marriages, there's a really strong relationship where in communities where there are not good jobs, people don't get married and there aren't a lot of strong families. And I think there's a lot of ancillary benefits to good jobs and good careers.
So social impact. So Reinventing Delaware is one pathway. There are other pathways to get champions. So that kind of leads me into my next question is, what are some of the hurdles or the initial issues for people to identify? If you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business, you want to identify or meet people like Ben, yourself, or others. What are some of the strategies, Desa or Ben, that helps people get linked to somebody who could be a champion or to help them think it through?
Well, that's the whole purpose of these dinners we host. And Desa, you've been to a few, and others is to try to build that network and offer that network. Much of the time, it's capital isn't the issue, and the foundation doesn't write $100,000 checks, but it writes $10,000 checks, and it's connected to a network that writes also $10,000 checks. So it's possible to both. I mean, the foundation is trying to offer this kind of network and access to capital to help this get started. And there's been a track record of success. Nerd It Now, which has just been an unbelievable success story. Greenbox Juices are two examples that come to mind, but there are 10 of these.
Yeah, I got you. So, and that one's coming up. There's one coming up. I know Stephanie will put it in the box for the participants. That's coming up in November. If you have a really good idea, I think the submissions are closed now, but you can also maybe jockey with somebody you may know in the community to see how you can get in. And there are other community champions. So, Desa, you're a community champion. Do people come to you oftentimes? And you could make introductions, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about networking in Delaware is that you're only about 2 degrees from someone else. So right. It's always nice to be able to connect folks. I always tell the students, and I tell the folks that work with me, you gotta give to get. I mean, I don't always look for the get. I'm always looking for the give. I think that's always the best part of it, is when you can make things happen. And if you are one that helps other people, then people will like to help you. So I do like to make those connections with folks whenever they need it.
Great. And here's the other thing too. So let's talk a little bit about your young startup. You know, you're pretty seasoned now, Desa, right? But the and I don't mean you personally, I'm talking about zip code. Let me be clear. Let me clarify that before I get in trouble.
I'm seeing Peggy, it's okay.
All right, well, no. So as a board, you either rely on a board, like as an organization, you get a board or you get an advisory committee. Whether you're a for-profit or not-profit, this is the same across the board, right? So how hard is it? Who do you look for in getting them involved in a startup? What kind of people are you looking for to bring in to help your small starting business or small starting nonprofit get moving? And where do you look?
Well, I came into Zip Code with an amazing board already, right? We have Ben, we have Jim, we have Porter, Terry and Melanie were on the board as well. So I think in looking at the board and looking at how we might expand our board, I look at where do we have gaps in subject matter expertise? So where are there challenges within the business that someone with expertise could help us? So that's how I'm looking at how I could expand the board. So if you're starting a board, you want to think about what are those particular pain points that you may have with your company. You want to have people on the board that fill that in the very beginning, because there's always someone out there with an outlook beyond what you know, and you want to be able to tap into their network, into their knowledge, into their advice as you grow, so that you're not just creating the wheel all the time. These are folks that can stretch you, help you, guide you into getting where you need to go, especially in the beginning.
And there are really helpful. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure emerging in Delaware to this end. I mean, the hen hatch, there are a lot of startup competitions. I mean, even if people don't have fully baked ideas, to wander around and meet folks, hear what other people are presenting. I mean, I think that's the way to get a network. I mean, I look at what the team at Carvertise have done, which did not come out of our foundation. I mean, they have been extraordinary networkers, and they're in the many millions of revenue now and growing rapidly. This is the firm that wraps automobiles with advertisements, and they target Uber and drivers, and they pay the drivers some money. It's an awesome little concept that's turning into a big concept, and they've landed clients like Wawa and others. So I think these networks exist, and I mean, that's one of the great, candidly, things about this country is that entrepreneurship is taken a foot, and it's not, back in the days when Apple was getting started, it was a rare thing, and the idea of venture financing was a rare thing. Today, billions and billions of dollars are out there looking for innovative little startups and to invest in, and it's kind of an everybody wins sort of game. And Delaware needs it does have some success, a lot of success stories, and it's the opportunity for many more.
So a couple of things now I think really important. So I want to kind of tie this up into a bow, what you both have been talking about. You recognized Carvertise. We actually had them here with Paul McConnell at our last series to talk about that championship and how he helped as a private business owner, really working with them and supporting them. To your point, both Desa, look at what you have and then what you need, and then target people in the community. If you don't know where to start, remember this group, the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation, we work with entrepreneurs. You reach out to us, we can help. To your point, Ben, you're talking about there's all of these things in the landscape. If you don't know what they are, come to us. We can help you locate. We're not here doing programming. We're here doing what we call ecosystem work. How do we put you in front of the different providers that Delaware is rich in providers? We also recognize there's some gaps. So what we're trying to do is bring these talking series together for you to be able to meet and hear and learn. And we are going to grow more of these opportunities to get you in rooms with people who think that way. Other entrepreneurs who've joined forces have come up with even bigger companies together because they've synergized, right? To your point, Ben, you're talking about there's a lot of people out there. They might be doing something similar to you. You could join forces and resources and build a bigger business. There's a lot of different ways to look at entrepreneurship, not just one. And the great thing is Delaware's small enough to do it in a lot of different ways. So any other comments about developing a board or an advisory committee or where people might go before we move on to the next question?
But no, but these are things that can start informally, and that's what the team at Carvertise did so well. But candidly, all entrepreneurs do it well, right? I mean, you can go right down the list of the dozen really interesting little companies that have emerged in Delaware, and they're really good at recruiting teams and getting advice.
Yep. And if you need to learn more about how to do that, please reach out to us because we're glad to talk to you about it. We will be doing some educational series on those types of things as well, so stay tuned. What advice would you give a business that's starting out? What would be the core foundational pieces that a business would need if they're a young entrepreneur and they're getting started that would maybe help to solidify success? What do you think is critical? I'll start with you, Desa, and then I'll go over to you, Ben. And then the next time I'll go to Ben and then I'll go to Desa. So I'll be fair about it, but Desa.
Well, I defer to Ben on this. With his years of experience in business, I defer to Ben on this, but I will just say from the seat that I'm in today, what I would recommend to those out there starting is 1, know your numbers, and 2, know your network. By knowing your numbers, I mean, if you need certain, if you need to bring in certain revenue to be profitable, to move forward, to do things, you need to know with specificity what that means. Does it take 5 touches to bring in a new client? Does it bring 10? And how many do you have with all your new folks? And are you looking at those metrics? Data is everything. Data is everything. I will say that when I came into this position, I had to learn what all those metrics were for the company. And I think that for any company where you're the leader, you're starting it off as the founder, you should know what those things are so that you can present that data to someone else if they ever needed to know the health of your company. And the other thing is knowing your network. And you talked a little bit earlier about, Peggy, about, introducing people to others, but it's also knowing that that network works for you too. Like if you have a problem, if you have a question, you can go to folks and that your network will be bluntly honest with you about the answer to the questions that you have, that you can present the challenges, that you can present, that you can talk to folks and get candid feedback about things you should think about or criticism of things that you're planning on doing. Because again, it takes a village to make these things work, and you want to be able to solicit all of that information. So don't go out there on your own, create a network and make sure that net is working for you as you move forward.
I love that net is working for you. I hope you coin that, or we should coin that, because I think it's important. I think a lot of times we bring people in and what is the value? Is it political value? Is it fun value? Is it expertise? Is it time, treasure, or talent? Or is it all three? And that's based on what your organization needs. Ben, what do you think is critical when there's a small startup or a business starting out? What are some of the critical foundational needs?
Yeah, but let me just build on Desa's comments. I mean, one other key point is Delaware is unique in that there is a business community and a political community, and the political leadership of the state and the business and philanthropic leadership of the state will bend over backwards to try to help people do this. And so there are a lot of resources out there that I don't think are adequately being taken advantage of. But from classical sort of entrepreneurship, they're really I would put businesses in 2 buckets. There are plenty of businesses, successful ones, that don't start with outside capital, that just start with sweat equity. And there's some phenomenal success stories in there. People don't need to get hooked up in the idea of, well, we need some external source of capital to go do it. Things can be started with very modest amounts of capital that go on to be enormous successes. Now, it helps if you've got some real expertise and you got some track record for having doing that. That's a little easier to raise capital in if in the second bucket if you need it. But I think we go down a slippery slope, and the entrepreneurial community does outside of Delaware more broadly, and thinking, well, I've got to raise $1 million or something like that, and that's not always the case. I think a few key things are critical. Obviously, a well-baked, well-vetted idea. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's an idea that you've put in front of customers that go, wow, that's pretty interesting, and the world kind of does need that. And I think that's a smart entrepreneur friend of mine that has done very, very well. I said, Ben, there's no such thing as a shortage of capital. If you have a shortage of capital, your idea isn't good enough. And I've always kind of remembered those thoughts, and I think there's real truth to them. So one is a fully baked, well vetted idea, and then a second is a good financial model. How is it going to work? How a lot of you look at in both of these buckets, a well thought out financial plan and model is critical to success. And a lot of thought needs to be put into how kind of the order that the dominoes fall, the customers you pitch first. It is if your idea is really particularly good, it's not hard to get some customers to sign up to pay in advance, and that may be the source of capital. I mean, you got to love what these guys at Kickstarter have done, which is to essentially create a way to start a business without getting capital, and they fund businesses by getting advanced orders for things like. There's a really robust market there for folks to do that. So an idea that's really vetted, a good financial model, and then a third, and this is probably the most important, is a credible group of co-founders. It's pretty rare that an individual can start something, but it happens. But it's much more. And that's really the skills needed to start, and the work required to start something from scratch is usually beyond that of a skill set of an individual person. So the idea of getting a strong, credible team in place is maybe a third thing, and that really would vie with number one. Most venture capitalists look at this and say they back a team and not an idea, and I think that's true. And that's more often than not, the original idea doesn't quite work and it requires a pivot. And that means if that's the case, you need a team smart enough to figure out this isn't going to work, and smart enough to figure out what plan B is. And so I would think those are the kind of the critical first steps. And I think that works if you're starting a nail salon or a semiconductor a fab facility.
I got you. So here's what we're going to say. I like to summarize, make sure I've captured everything in our notes so that we know what we're talking about here is that you start out with an entrepreneur who's passionate, right? Passion is not enough, right? There are a lot of people passionate about a lot of things, but what they need is a really good business plan. It can't be, to your point, half-baked idea. It really needs to be well thought through. And there are a lot of organizations that help you with this, whether it's the small business SBD, or whether it's Launcher. There's a bunch of different organizations that can help groups do that, right? And we can point you in that direction if you need it. Financial model, knowing exactly what you need to be able and bringing the money in, and if you need somebody to help you with that, get somebody on your board. Back to Desa's point earlier, if that's a weak place, get somebody who understands, a CPA or somebody in a bank who can help you create that, right? And then, who are your first customers, and how do you get some, where you were talking about Kickstarter, advanced orders, if it's something like that, or making sure that you are in a market. A lot of people will launch that nail salon on a street that already has 4.
Right.
And you've got too much competition. So truly understanding your market is really what you're saying is, what is my market? Does it have a value? Will people own it? If I have all of these and some other co-founders around the table, I can bring in more resources to get it done. That's what I'm hearing.
Right.
Yes. And I want to add something to that.
Sure.
Let's do a case example of that. So Ben, as the co-founder of Zip Code, and I'm talking about Zip Code from a third body experience at this point, right? So when Ben, Porter, and Jim sat down and thought about Zip Code, they thought about the financial model first. And the financial model is that the students would pay a portion of the tuition and the corporate partners pay that remaining tuition. So it's $15,000 to train a student. The student pays $6,000 up front. They do the training. And if they're hired by a corporate partner, the corporate partner pays the remaining $9,000. If the student is not hired by a corporate partner, the student's given a discount and they pay the remaining $6,000 over, let's say, a 2-year period. That way the student who is likely from low income source, probably has loans, credit, they probably don't want to have to take out a whole lot of money, and they are going to be out of work for 3 months. So that initial tuition needs to be accessible and affordable to folks. And they don't, so they shouldn't have to take out too many loans. That helps get the student in the door. The application costs nothing. The student is given all the materials that they need to do it. So they're provided with a loaner laptop. They're provided with free resources throughout. So all of that makes sense from the student perspective. It makes sense from the corporate perspective, because oftentimes it costs about $20,000 to $30,000 to source an entry-level software developer. So to pay the remaining tuition makes sense for any company. There's no reason why a company wouldn't want to do that, because they're getting quality talent at probably half the price that they would have had to spend to find that talent anywhere else. And because of it, now you have folks that are coming in that are diverse. You have women. We have about a third of the folks that have come through Zip Code are women. You have African-American, Latino folks, about 20% African-American, 10% Hispanic over time. You have 25% coming in that are at 200% below the poverty level, but they're able to do the program because of stipends and scholarships that are available to them. So this is a sustainable model. When they sat down at the table and thought about Zip Code, they thought about the financial model, and it's sustainable. It helps the student, it helps the partners, it helps the ecosystem. And by really baking that out, now we're at 6 years with the 500 graduates, and we have the diversity that we have. But it's really being right back at step one, trying to think this through and making sure, like Ben said, that they were clear when they set forth. That's what's important.
Well, and to your point is really having your idea, thinking about it, right? That stability. But then earlier on too, Ben said something about pivoting, right, Desa? If it's not working, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Maybe it's not going about it the right way. Having someone help you rethink that and pivot quickly. Instead of, I know me, I'll beat my head against a wall for a long period of time before I get a really, bashed in forehead and a little bit worried about, sometimes you have to be nimble when we were talking about entrepreneurship. How do you make a change? How do you pivot? And then how do you find the right people that help you pivot? So this is all really important stuff. And, if you don't know where to start, like, I keep pitching Dupont Freedom Foundation, but we also have a lot of partners. If you're not sure where to start with where you are, then you're reaching out and being part of our network. We can help get you in. We have a lot of really awesome partners. And we don't know everything. We don't need to know everything, but we have partners who do. And getting you in the right door is what is important, right? So just keeping that in mind, figuring out there's a lot of doors in Delaware. But you don't want to enter the wrong one at the wrong time. You want to enter the right one for the right purposes, right? To get the needs met of your organization.
And not only in Delaware, but outside of Delaware, is there's a broader the neat thing about the world we live in today. If you compare it with 20, 30, 40 years ago, is there is so much more activity, diversity, and opportunity, and we're not there yet. But I think as a society, we're making progress. So it's exciting to see. By the way, there is a question came in from a guy named Joe about the acceptance rate at Zip Code Wilmington. And Desa may have an answer to that question. I don't know can you see the question, Desa, or?
Sure. Yep. So Joe, thank you for the question. The question is, with a 10% acceptance rate at Zip Code and no coding experience necessary, what do you look for in a good application? So what we look for in a good application is one that goes the distance, basically. So the application process starts with just an application. You fill out name and that type of information. That sets you up to receive an email that has resources in it that they can use, that an applicant can use to study for our assessment. The assessment just gives us an idea of whether you are a logical thinker, that's not necessarily coding skills, but whether you can think through a problem in a logical fashion. So folks take that assessment, and if they pass that, they move on to a group interview. And the group interview gives us an idea of how you would work in teams. So you're with a group of people, about 4 to 5 people, you're given small projects to work on together, and you collectively do the best you can on these projects. Some of them are logic questions. Some of them are just, organizational things, just to see how you work together. And if you're a good team player, you work well in a team, then you move on to a behavioral interview with me, as well as a whiteboard interview with our Director of Education, Chris Younger. So after that process, after going through that process, that's what ends up coming down to the 10%. And then for folks who, if we have too many folks that we think could come into the cohort, then we defer some to the next cohorts. They don't have to go through that process again. But so that's a great question. It's, it takes about 20 to 30 hours for an applicant to get through the process. So it's not an easy thing where you're just signing up and coming in. And we do that on purpose because this is 80 to 100 hours a week, full time for 12 weeks. It is not an easy boot camp. And so we need to know that people are seriously committed to doing it and that they'll go the distance, because Zip Code is investing in every single person that comes in. Again, we only take half the tuition up front. We need to know that people are going to make it to the end and get that job.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that. And there's another question from Jessica Downey. She's like, what do you think is the struggle in having more entertainment in Delaware? Which is interesting. There are a lot of entrepreneurs in that arena. But what are your thoughts behind that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
And I'm the wrong demographic. I've not been to a hip event in 20 years, but but I love the sentiment, and I think if there are some silver linings to this, brutal COVID experience we've all been through, one of them, I think, is society, cities, and governments understand how important entertainment and restaurants are to communities, right? Mm-hmm. And they've let restaurants, for instance, take over sidewalks, which there was more resistance to I think, before COVID. And I think that's a good thing. I think cities understand how important entertainment, hospitality, restaurants are to their vitality and livelihood than I think they did before. So I think there are lots of new things that could emerge, and I think there are smart people thinking every day about what new kind of entertainment and hospitality options a city like Delaware, Wilmington should have, and I think it's awesome. I don't know if I'm answering Jessica.
Well, I think to your point, you are. So there is a shift. If there was ever a time, now might be it, because there is more of a openness to exploring those ideas. Many businesses are looking, how do they get more people out? And creativity, the arts online, the arts pivoted really quickly to help try to address that. Right. But now that the world is opening back up, and if you're an artist that's looking to create a business out of that art form, there's no difference in the planning process. You're still going to really need to have some champions. You're going to still need to have a plan. You need to tell how you're going to operationalize it and bring in the income, and then, how you're going to scale it is what you're doing in some way. And so, if I know if I myself, and I think Desa and all other others, if there's something you're not as good at, the financial probably wouldn't be what I was good at, right? I'm just going to tell you, I have ideas all day, but having somebody help me put the financials for my own business or others, right, is critical. And, there doesn't always have to be a cost associated with that. A lot of that can be free. So some of the struggle is that, was there an appetite? But there is now. There is a lot more of entrepreneurial opportunities. Explore them. And number 3 is, make a good case for the business behind it. And if you need help to make a good case, then come see some of us so that we can help you do that. So hopefully that
and as an example, I mean, there's a whole new category of social influencers, another thing that did not really exist a decade ago, right? There are artists and entertainers getting good at their craft on TikTok and on YouTube, and they wield enormous influence and power by doing so. Not only are they paid by these platforms in many cases, so that may be a way to get entertainment options started, is to start with some of these free platforms that will pay you to produce the content.
Well, we had an entrepreneur who came through who had like 67,000 people who followed. But then she was an influencer, but then had trouble getting things to market. And so she came to us separate. She was like, I have the political influence, but we need to get more to market. And we worked with her to help to scale and work on ways to create that business plan, right? So, you know, start where you are, figure out what you need, and then look for others to help you get there. You do not have to do this all on your own. Like literally anybody who's ever been successful cannot say they did it 100% on their own, right? So find others who just passionately want to help you, right? So I'm going to open it up now. We're at 1:15. I want to make sure if there's other questions, there are some other individuals here who may have some questions. There's no wrong questions. You're welcome, Jessica. Thank you for asking a question. Our presenters live for that, right? So, if there's someone else that has a question, please feel free to put it into the chat box, either in the Q&A or in the chat box itself, so that we can answer or see if there's something that we can do for you here today. If I don't get anything quickly, I've got a couple other questions that I can ask, but I want to make sure that getting to anybody's specific needs who may be on here today. So the other thing that I have is the right people. You know, how do you locate them if you're not in certain circles? How do you locate people that might be what you need for your board or your advisory committee or what have you? How do you find these individuals out in the community?
Well, I mean, one of the neat things is we have the internet now. We have Google, and by the way, these resources didn't exist two or three decades ago, and so there are a lot of there are a lot of informal networks and formal networks coming out of a number of universities. University of Delaware is probably leading the pack in entrepreneurism, at the entrepreneurial skills at the Horn program, the Hen Hatch, but most Delaware State University has some similar universities. Del Tech, Wilmington University, all have kind of similar kind of resources. So those are kind of that's kind of one resource. Then the Chamber of Commerce, a whole bunch of groups like this foundation exists to help. So there are, I think, a Google search away from a lot of great resource to help people get started. And there are another that we don't talk about much, but I'm a big fan of, is there are a lot of retirees that want to help out. They don't in this community and across the country, for that matter. They don't need. In many cases, they're not looking for pay. They're just looking for a way to contribute to the world. So those are skills. I mean, as an entrepreneur, advice to entrepreneurs is I would go seek out people that have done what you're trying to do before, and they've frequently got blueprints and maps and ideas and suggestions, and they've made a lot of the errors that and their advice can prevent you from doing the same.
Absolutely. And then there's also LinkedIn. Many people reached out to me through LinkedIn, and I've helped different people. And I know
exactly
that if you're not on that platform, there's a huge value in networking on that platform as well. Jeremy has a question for us. It says, thank you for this conversation. The question is about, when should a new business think about scalability? That's a great question.
It is a great question. Before we answer it, I just want to mention that Jeremy Sabina is a recent graduate of Zip Code. So congrats, Jeremy. But I'll let Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I would make sure that the product market fit is right before you really talk about scaling it. There's a great a book written by an Israeli entrepreneur called The Lean Startup, which really is a proponent of developing close relationships with a few key customers and really trying to make sure you've developed something that they like. And their metric is they should want your product or solution so much they're willing to put up with bugs, and you shouldn't wait for the perfect product to be produced. Now, of course, this doesn't apply in every industry. You can't do that in therapeutics, right? You can't make a great new drug, and of course, the money required to make a great new drug is typically about $1 billion. But so that's an excellent resource. But I would say make sure your product market fit is really good and really well tested, and frequently your customers and the early adopters will help you expand. And there's some clever kind of free ways to add some scalability before you start paying for scalability.
Well, here's so Stephanie, something that's come up, I know you're on here and listening, is that, many of our speakers have alluded to books. When when Mac was talking, he had a couple books. I believe all of us have read certain things on here. Ben has alluded to 2 different books. I think one of the things we should probably think about doing is maybe a book circle for entrepreneurs, as well as making sure that we put a list of really important books that, entrepreneurs, should read and learn from, that can help them in their journey. And what we'll do is go back to all of our speakers, asking them about some of their favorites, and then put that together. And that's something else that we can offer, I think would be important. And, if you're an entrepreneur and you've read something, so this is a 2-way street. So if you're in the network, if you're, you've read something that's made a difference for you, share it with us. Let us know so that we can put that out. I find that, that's where you get the best ideas. Learn from other people. I mean, they've skinned their knee already. Why do you need to do it, right? So really, really good point. Star loved that idea too. She's like, I love that idea. And we'll make sure. And Philip put something in the box, and I'm struggling with it a little bit. So Philip, you might need to help me out a little bit. It talks about that there are entrepreneurs that fly under the radar. They've started like Envirometrics and sold to IHG, Return Central sold to. So it sounds to me like there are certain small startups or entrepreneurs that go on to sell to bigger companies or to merge with bigger companies. That happens every single day. And as a matter of fact, if your competition, larger companies oftentimes will offer you money to buy your ideas so you don't become competition for them. And that's your right as an entrepreneur to sell, right? So there,
No, those were 100-person companies.
Oh, there are, okay.
Software companies in Delaware.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like if you look at 62 Reed's Way, that was our building.
I got you.
Casho Mill Road, 1501 Casho Mill Road, that was our building.
Right.
So
right.
I think there's a lot of, I think the one thing that Delaware doesn't do is we don't celebrate a lot of successes.
Yes.
That's
but
a good
point. But and the Return Central was right across from Christiana Hospital in that big building. And there's several others too. And so I think people don't really understand that there have been big successes. I mean, we're talking when they weren't sold for small amounts of money. I mean, it's easy enough to Google it.
Right.
And
so Philip, to your point, and really thank you for that. And I think you've made a very valuable point to us from an ecosystem perspective. Maybe we need to champion the success sometimes. We need others to know what and who and what's come up and where they are and where they went. And, part of it is they can be a part of the series. So if there is someone out there who's done that, we can ensure in a lot of different ways that they get a voice. And how did they get where they were? We're starting out with some of our funders and founders, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't highlight someone else who's been very relevant in the ecosystem in Delaware and showcase them in some way, shape, or form. And talk
there's a huge software company called Applied Control Engineering, which is right by Timothy's. I don't think anybody's heard of it. They just kind of quietly go about their business. It's a big software company.
All right. So these are, if you put down a couple of those ideas in the chat box for us, Philip, it would be great. We can reach out. Let's find out what is in our landscape and our network. Right. Let's broaden it. I mean, that's part of creating a more robust ecosystem. So thank you for chiming in on those things. And then there was some other stuff. Also, Desa put a link in. Desa, you want to tell us what that is too?
No, that was Ben. Ben is
okay.
Yeah, I put in a link for the lean startup, but I'm not sure who that was that chimed in earlier. But you're right. These businesses are growing all around us, and we do not celebrate them enough. And that's one of the things we got to do more as a state. There are a lot of success stories from quiet entrepreneurs that keep their head down and build awesome companies that the community benefits from. And they benefit from, and we need more of that, and we need to celebrate it more.
All right, so I'm going to open it up. Is there one other last question, and then I want to sum up what we've covered today so that we can close out on time, and see if there's any last minute announcements from Stephanie. Give her a heads up so I don't just like throw it at her last minute. If there isn't any other questions, I just want to sum up a couple things that I've heard today. All right, so thank you.
Before you get started, I am going to jump in really quickly. So the last question I'd like to ask for Desa and Ben, who have both been to Reinventing Delaware quite some times, because I agree with everyone that we do need to celebrate entrepreneurship a bit more in Delaware. And the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation, we do so with our Freedom Award, and we're attempting to broaden out with our Reinventing Delaware. It has been very upstate focused, but we are broadening out to downstate, and we are marketing that event a bit more so that way it can have a much larger reach. Desa and Ben, the submission window for Reinventing Delaware is currently closed, but what advice would you give to new entrepreneurs who are attending and who are going to be presenting and proposing their idea at that event?
Well, one of the things is be ready to hear some fabulous ideas that come from your table. So don't be intimidated by that. Just know that everyone's coming with really great ideas. Don't be intimidated. Go ahead and share yours as well. Be ready to really explain that in short form. Peggy was advising me, because I'm going to pitch one of my ideas. Peggy was advising me to have a visual, just something easy for people to just capture in very quickly. I'm sorry. I'm going to.
Sorry.
So people can just really understand and digest your idea in a matter of seconds. Make it like an elevator pitch. It needs to be really short, really tight, so that people can really understand it. And then just go have fun. I mean, this is really a chance to get to meet a lot of people. This is a great networking opportunity. Every single time I've gone to this event, I've come out with 2 or 3 more people within the community that I really want to get to know, like meaningful connections within the community. And so it's just a great event. I love going.
Awesome, thank you.
So, and then there's, this is the most informative. I'm thinking about starting a nonprofit. I think I'm on the right path here. Well, good. That's great, Judy. Thank you for that feedback. We love to hear that. Share to your friends about this. We're going to continue to do this once a month, including an educational, which you'll find in the chat box. The 3 that are coming up on November the 4th is Understanding the Customer's Journey. This is a really good in-depth look with Hook PR on how to knowing who your customer is and market to them, specifically the customer. On the 17th, the Power of Entrepreneurship, that's there in Marquivas with Nerd It Now to really talk about his journey and that rapid pace. And the 9th is the Power of Entrepreneurial Champions with Chris Buccini and DETV, really around marketing and PR for the state in some way, shape, or form, and branding. But I'm going to sum up just here to end today. Number 1, you got to be part of the network to network, right? If you don't know where to start, you can reach out to us. We'll be glad to point you in the right direction. And if we don't know, we can try to figure it out. We promise. Number 2, if you're going to have a plan, it's got to be a good plan. You've got to get it down on paper. You've got to have your financial model. You need to think about your customer base and your market analysis. And if those things seem scary to you, there are partners and organizations that will help you create those things, work with you on those things, and advance you as you build your small business or nonprofit. Finally is that there are people who do want to work with you and champion you, right? And it's about hooking up with them on LinkedIn. It's about getting out in the community with these free events that we do are all free. You can chat people in the box. You can get to know them that way. There is a lot of different ways and it costs nothing to start a conversation. And then everything good that has ever come of any of these businesses have all been around conversation networks and capacity, building that through volunteers and extra things that they've gotten from a community. in which they live, work, and play. So any last minute thoughts, Desa or Ben or Stephanie, before we close out?
Thank you all for participating, and then thank all the folks. I guess we had 50 or 60 folks participate. But I think if I had one message for me is that there's a whole community of folks that want to help you succeed.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you, Christy and Stephanie, putting this together, Peggy, and moderating, and everyone in hosting us and having us here. Please reach out to Zip Code Wilmington if you are interested in hiring some of this great talent, Philip, or any of the other folks out there. And if you're interested in applying to the program, we have there's lots of alumni on LinkedIn. You can connect with them and ask them about the program, and they'll tell you. But apply now. The application deadline for the February cohorts is November 28th.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Desa. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Peggy, for moderating. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And as I mentioned earlier, the links to, Peggy mentioned earlier, the links to the webinars are available in the chat box. And this recording of the webinar will be available on the P2P Freedom Foundation's YouTube channel.
Thank you
Have
very
a
much.
nice day.
You know.
Thank you. Bye-bye.